the idea of a critique, like sort of what I would imagine the classic idea of a critique, doesn't work for me anymore. I'm basically I'm just not doing them anymore. No, I'm having one-on-one discussions with students, which are fantastic. They get a ton out of it. I get a ton out of it. I can say what I really want to say without walking on eggshells as much as in a group, because they're incredibly sensitive to one another and to what the professor says. And what was happening in the last couple of years is that I felt like I was lying. And it became this. Essentially, it was students put up their work. The other students look at it and basically say things that are equivalent to like, you got this. You go, girl.
Oh, really?
Almost. Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
God.
I mean, really
and that's not where I was expecting that to go, because I'm of a different generation.
No. It was like everything. And then one year students started applauding after every critique. And that threw me off.
Welcome to What's My Thesis. I'm Javier Proenza, and today my guest is Amir Zaki. Amir, you are teaching at Riverside?
Yes. Yes.
And how long have you been? Are you originally from LA?
No, I grew up in Southern California, though. I grew up in what's now termed the Inland Empire, although I didn't hear that term until I was an adult. I grew up in a place called Beaumont, which is in between LA and Palm Springs.
Oh, okay.
You have to drive through it.
To get there?
Yes. So it's the pass area. It's kind of a little dip, and the mountains are on both sides, and it was quite rural at the time. Cherry orchards everywhere, and mountains, and boredom and all that stuff. But then went to UC Riverside as an undergraduate, UCLA as a grad student in the late 90s, and then I got a job teaching at Riverside after graduate school. So I've been teaching there now since the year 2000. So this is my 25th year.
My goodness.
Of teaching, yeah.
Was it not to say that your life was easy, but was it easier to get a gig when you were because it seems like the market of teaching jobs is very saturated. Are you tenured?
I am. Yeah. Okay. I would say that the art world was just smaller. It was incredibly fortunate. It was not easy. No, it was a long shot. It was a total long shot. A job opening came up for what was kind of called like a digital technology position in the art department. And I just so happened to be somebody who was
the only one at the time
working in photography, but really embracing digital technology. So I kind of came up on the cusp between analog and digital. I love them both. I teach analog photography still. It's one of my favorite classes, but I also completely embrace technology. And so it was a strange set of circumstances. I first got asked to lecture there right after graduate school, and I lectured like 3 classes a quarter for 3 years straight. So it was 9 classes a year, which is insane. Like nobody does that. I was just back to back being in photography for 3 years straight, and then that job opening came up, and I applied, and it just was super lucky. So
I'm sure people liked you. I mean, if you had already been there.
I think that I had a decent rapport. And I think I just, the job market is incredibly saturated, and it's kind
even
of like,
back then.
It was like a total blessing. So.
Okay. So then I just want to go back, because it's funny what you say about Inland Empire, because wasn't there like a Gina Gershon, Harvey Keitel movie called Inland?
Yes.
Okay.
Came out way late. I never even no, and I think it's David Lynch.
Is it David Lynch? It might be.
I believe.
It was fucking weird.
We'll have to look. I think it's a David Lynch film, and I can't even say that I saw the whole thing. I think I probably saw some of it, and didn't really vibe with, like, I was expecting it to actually be of the ennui of the Inland Empire that I grew up in. And it's like an outsider's view of the Inland Empire. It's not someone who grew up there.
Yeah, for sure. Well, tell me a little bit about that, because I mean, I imagine California has very different lands. I grew up in Florida.
Okay.
So there is a emptiness in this state sometimes that I just find fascinating. Yeah. And the landscapes, for us, it was just like swamps, and like Alligator Alley and just but over here, so you were a photographer. I'm guessing there was a lot, when I always start with the art origins.
Yeah.
When did you start to take pictures? When did you start? And then at what point were you like, oh man, I'm stuck doing this. I can't not do it.
Yeah, I'm trapped. I did not grow up making art at all. My dad was a scientist who immigrated from Egypt. My mom's
You're Egyptian?
Yeah, I'm half Egyptian, and my mom grew up in Minnesota, and she has a European background, and she taught home economics and psychology and things like that. So they're both educators, and I, grew up doing, kind of gravitating a little bit more towards science, I would say, than or just like science and philosophy.
Those are both, I think, somewhat akin to art, though, because there's an observational element to it, right?
Totally.
As opposed to even philosophy. It's almost
For
like
sure.
art is in between the two.
Yeah, and I hound this idea of curiosity, and I think that's like for my students is like that's the thing that I think you have to either naturally just be a curious person or try to cultivate it. And if you're not really curious, I really don't think you should be an artist. Impossible. So I was
I think that is the trap, right?
Yeah,
the curiosity.
I went to, I started off as a psychology major, moved to philosophy, started to get a little jaded in philosophy. And
what jaded you about it?
I grew up, I don't want to say arguing, having a lot of philosophical, in quotations, discussions with my family. So it came naturally to me, the discourse and all that bantering and not getting upset about things, really.
Was your family like, what was their, if you had to put them under a subcategory, were the existentialists?
My dad was a really thoughtful guy. He was completely non-dogmatic. He grew up Muslim in Egypt, but we didn't grow up religious here. Neither of my mom was Catholic, and neither of them pushed religion on any of us. We had lots of discussions about religion. We had lots of discussions about existence, but it was complete. Nothing was off the table, and I really appreciated that.
What's funny about Catholic is that even though you weren't brought up Catholic, I know what that means.
Yeah.
My mom was talking to me, because I keep trying to tell her that I have a lot of Catholic guilt, and I'm a lapsed Catholic, but she was telling me that she went for, I don't know, I think maybe it was Christmas. No, it was like a Thanksgiving thing. And the priest was just talking about how good suffering is. And I was like, oh my God, finally you get it.
Yeah. That was, I mean, it was really good. We had a lot of that. And so philosophy came naturally as a major, but then what jaded me was that it just got really analytical and boring and technical, like logic classes. I was like, so then I was writing poetry and had a girlfriend and was in a band, and my friends and I were into music and whatever. We were really sort of like post-punk alternative goth kids in the Inland Empire. And so I did not have a background in art, but I did take some photographs like casually with friends at night, like smoking cigarettes and doing stupid shit.
Like a Larry Clark kind of vibe, except without all the...
Exactly. And then I took my girlfriend, who's my wife now for almost 30 years,
Jesus.
Dory. It is insane. We kind of got married on a little bit of a dare in a weird way. It was like
always the best way to make it last.
and she was an art major.
Wait, she dared you? Or did a friend?
It was more like, speaking of like religious.
Did you get married ironically? Like,
yes, in a way, it was a kind of a threat. I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but it was a threat sort of from her side of the family that was like, you guys can't move out together unless you're married. And my immediate reaction was like, okay, fuck you, we'll get married.
What's
So it wasn't a big deal. I was like,
that's
okay.
like the alpha reverse card.
yeah. I was like, that's it. All right. Well,
wait, what are their parents? What's her parents' background? Or what is her background? I guess is a more direct question.
She's Mexican American, I guess.
Okay.
One parent is Mexican and one parent is from Maine, and so
these Americans falling in love with immigrants.
Exactly. We had an interesting, relationship before, but the other reason was financial. We got married so we could go our last year at UC Riverside in married student housing.
Oh, okay.
And it's cheap.
So even the schools were like,
$360.
if you want to live together, you got to be married.
Actually, at the time, there was definitely no like domestic partnership. I don't think we were married, and we had a 2-bedroom ex-military kind of home. So everything was like sort of smaller than usual, but it was technically 2-bedroom, freestanding like home. Right off campus that used to be military housing, but they turned it into married student housing, and it was $360 a month.
That's amazing.
It was amazing
for 2 people.
For 2 people, and so we lived there last
like
year.
$150 each.
It was incredible. We had jobs, and
we're just depressing everyone right now.
then moved, and back in my day, things were cheap. Then we went to UCLA, both of us. So I became an art major. Photography, got interested in photography my second to last year at school, and it just kind of was a very natural fit. It was geary and techy enough. Like there was something about the machine. I can't draw. Never took a drawing class in my life. Still, felt incredibly inadequate about anything that required. I'm left-handed. Maybe that has something to do with it, but I don't know. Just anything that required that kind of coordination or thought, like I can't do that, or I don't think I can. But photography was really very liberating.
Yeah.
Like I got it. I got the machine part, and I got the like how to use it and what I could do with it part. And then I did grow up in a very boring place, but tried to find interesting things.
I mean, it's arguable. Like I'm sure that it's pretty interesting in terms of like going back to what I was saying about that. And I think that there's like there's a history of that, like California photography language, right? Those landscapes, and especially, because a lot of it is so cinematic. Because I always say this is when I first moved out to LA, I was like amazed. Like it was like I was tripping because I was in a movie because the lighting was so different than Florida's.
Yeah.
And I kind of miss that feel. I can't get that back.
Yeah.
But I remember like just being like, whoa, this is a trip. Like you literally felt like, kind of in Mulholland Drive when when that switch happens.
Yeah, it's like that. I mean, the other thing I had going for me, which I only now look back at all of the negatives. I scanned all my negatives from undergraduate recently, and I'm looking back at them. And the only other thing I had going for me really is that I knew nothing about art history.
Yeah.
And that was great.
Yeah.
Because I didn't care. I just wanted to make weird photographs. That's what so it was like, I didn't know, like the word problematic, which is now concept crept up to mean like a sin essentially. But back then I didn't really care if I was, we were making nude photographs with friends. We were going up on hikes and taking props with us. And I didn't know anything about the history of photography. So I was just learning it as I was doing it. So there was zero baggage. I wasn't an art kid. I didn't grow up it was this kind of like,
You didn't have that thing. I remember when I was I was studying early on, and there was like this hatred for Picasso, which became trendy, and then now I think is passé as fuck.
Yeah, right.
But it is funny, like existing in relation to those things is probably. I did a lot of history of photography, and I think that made taking pictures harder for me. You know,
it can be stifling.
Yeah, and it just made me overthink and shoot from a less intuitive place. Like when I first started taking pictures, I was doing just like I was kind of using the camera more like a pencil, or you know, like isn't that who made the book In Nature's Pencil? Is that Talbot?
Yes.
Okay.
Fox Talbot.
Yeah. So I was more in that, like, and I think that I tried to be more of a photographer's photographer, and that was like my unraveling. Like I was more of an artist using photography, but I understood. But I will give credit to the learning of photography as like opening up the rest of my practice, because then I actually found my way to conceptual art through photography and understanding the mechanics of what, and like the limitations of a medium, and what it can and can't do. Which was really interesting. Well, where are you at now in terms? Well, first of all, can I ask you how old you are?
50 this year.
Okay.
Just turned 50 on August 27th.
So you're my brother's age. Wow. Yeah.
How old are you?
I'm born in 80. You're 1974.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not that good at math. I literally know somebody that's your age.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting. And I think that context, especially as the generations get older, I think really is interesting. So what, I guess, like, let's go into, like, how do you feel your education is different, especially since you're in a tenured spot versus students? How has the world changed academically?
It's huge in the last 6-7 years. I mean, just pre-pandemic, pandemic, post-pandemic.
Even that
massive. Yeah. This would derail, and we would go on a really long podcast if I really ranted about this. But the short version is that I change my teaching all the time, the way I teach, and I try to do it with the way the culture changes. Sometimes it lags behind, and sometimes it's a little frustrating. But just in the last couple of years, I've had a bit of an epiphany about, teaching at a public institution, and the fact that the students are of a very different generation, and the idea of a critique, like the sort of what I would imagine the classic idea of a critique that I did as an undergrad and in a classroom and graduate student and grad school, and teach grads, and that kind of critique situation doesn't work for me anymore. I just actually had a meta critique with my class, and I asked them what they thought of their critiques in other classes, because I'm basically I'm just not doing them anymore. No, I'm having one-on-one discussions with students, which are fantastic.
Oh yeah.
Exhausting. But they get a ton out of it. I get a ton out of it. I can say what I really want to say without, walking on eggshells as much as in a group, because they're incredibly sensitive to one another and to what the professor says. And what was happening in the last couple of years is that before my, we'll get into that too. Before my medical leave because of my brain tumor, I was having I would go home so upset after a critique, because I felt like I was lying. I would go into the classroom, and it became this. Essentially, it was students put up their work, the other students look at it and basically say things that are equivalent to you got this, you go girl.
Oh, really?
Almost. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
God.
I mean, really
and that's not where I was expecting that to go, because I'm of a different generation.
No. It was like everything. And then one year students started applauding after every critique, and that threw me off. And everything was just,
I want to burn down the whole system now.
And I couldn't stand, and I would find myself just I'm a really direct person, like blunt. Yeah. I told my students apologies for my bitchy resting face. I'm not upset. I'm just kind of like contemplative, a little serious, and a little direct. And my preference would be to do critiques like that. That doesn't fly. Like I would have
you would
students
your
hating,
reviews,
they're terrible, and they would just get upset. And so I started basically just struggling so much about how to say something and find the positive in what essentially is a lot of times very, very lazy work. That's really the
Dude,
difference.
I got my ass kicked. Like I still have trauma from my critiques.
Yeah, I mean, my students might have interesting ideas, and of course there's always the exceptions get left out. I have fantastic students, like really great. But for the most part, most of them will not be and don't want to be artists.
Yeah. They're just taking it as a credit. Yeah.
And they're in an public institution getting an art degree, and they're not going to go on to graduate school. And so that realization was like, oh, well, you don't make people artists.
Yeah.
You don't teach it into them. You don't go, oh, okay, I'm gonna
they're burdened by it from
yes,
and have to come to terms with it.
Exactly. You pull up the stats of like what your life's gonna be like, and you say like, if this isn't something you really feel like you have to do, I don't know why.
Are you a martyr?
Yeah. What's wrong with you? So I tell them that, and they don't like that either. They say, "Oh, you discouraged us." I'm like, "Well, I'm trying to save your parents some money, basically, because what are you doing?" And
I think that you know what, that's refreshing to hear, because I have been kind of on a trip. My experience wasn't very good. I won't digress, but I just wanted to say that is actually refreshing. To have a little realism in your art school, in your art education. Even like, I'm sure that those people may be resistant to it.
Yeah.
But down the line, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I remember."
Yeah. I mean, I do get students, they remember everything. Actually, it's crazy. Yeah, they remember way more than I do about things that I apparently said or whatever. Yeah. allegedly said. I guess I did. I say a lot of things. I do speak off the cuff and sometimes, and just riff, and I like to be spontaneous in those critiques, but now I feel like they just don't work. So I'm trying to just adjust my teaching in the last, I'm now an elder in the department. In my last parts of teaching, I really am getting into connecting with them one-on-one. Like I love teaching the darkroom class now because it's so hands-on and I'm with them all the time. So those last few times I've taught that class have been wonderful, because I make them make a Spotify playlist. Mm-hmm. I outlaw headphones and earbuds so that they have to listen to each other's music and kind of like in the dark room sort of like have discussions about how someone's music's shitty and someone's not. And then I learn good music from like the occasional amazing student. And so
what's your favorite new shit that you've discovered? Because I don't have that.
It's daily now. Spotify is like, they give you day lists and they base it on your, like today's was like gloom core Tuesday morning. So I've just been getting into stuff that I probably should have gotten into when I was in graduate school, late 90s, early 2000s, slow core kind of stuff has really just been, because the band I'm playing in, we kind of are playing a little bit in that mode. So Mount Erie,
Mount Erie
turned me on to that, and I listened to the most depressing records I've ever heard in my life. But
have you listened to the Microphones?
Yes, and then a friend was like, "You got," and then so it's been that kind of thing.
That guy's a fucking G.
He's those 2 or 3 records when his wife passed away. I just listened to those for the first time, a month or 2 ago, and given the year that I've been going through, just how emotional it's been, it's like. It's such beautiful songwriting, and I can't understand it. how he was able to do it.
Yeah.
I just really don't. It's beautiful poetry. It's beautiful music. It's heart-wrenching, but it's also completely real, and like you can't turn away from that reality.
That one song, the I Thought I Felt Your Shape or whatever it's called. It's on the Microphones album. That whole album is so good. It's funny that you say that, because that's kind of how I got into what's it called? Neutral Milk Hotel. And I was like, oh, when did this come out? And I was like, oh my God, this is like concurrent with Pavement.
Yeah, exactly.
And Pavement dwarfed it for me.
I'm having a lot of that happen. I'm going, really? How did I miss like all of this music? So, but it's an interesting thing, because music has jumped up in priority for me in the last year. I was a podcast junkie.
Yeah, me too. I'm actually going through the same transformation.
And it was such a weird thing. I was like on Twitter listening to podcasts. Like I was a really early podcast adopter when this podcast Partially Examine Life came out, which is a philosophy podcast 20 years ago probably now, or 15. And I was actually a guest on there once talking about the sublime, and I know the guys a little bit. And then I was just hooked, commuting to work, podcast. And
so it's a good way to not be in your own thoughts.
Yeah. And then I had my seizure and had my hospitalization and came out, and I was off. I was like, it's none of this means shit. They're all circle jerking. That started happening before. It's like the same guests are rotating on each other's podcasts. Yeah. And so,
especially in the comedy space,
social commentary. It's like, Sam Harris will have this guy on, and this guy will have this Sam Harris on,
fuck Sam Harris
and fuck Sam Harrison sometimes, and then not, and then there's just a shit ton of this kind of, it just became so insulated and incestuous. I hated it.
Yeah. No, but that's definitely a good way to put that.
Yeah. And so and then I was just like not into my body, and my brain was just not interested. My priorities shifted to my family and living and surviving and the things that made me happy, and music jumped way up on that list. And so I just listened to just basically stopped listening to podcasts almost completely and listen to music.
Except for this one.
You listen
this every week.
I will, and listen to music all the time and play and yeah. So
that's crazy. Yeah. Well, could you tell me a little bit about the seizure and all of that? Because I mean, that's pretty intense, a pretty interesting thing.
Yeah.
I knew somebody that had started to like wear headset to use the phone because they had been using it like this, and the doctor said that's how they got their tumor.
Oh, yeah, it sounds a little sketchy. No, the kind of the abridged version of the story is that in 2000, like mid-pandemic, I guess, I started
2020.
Yeah,
I do that shit all the time too.
2020. Yeah. It's gotten worse. I started to develop like what was diagnosed as like sciatica, basically like numbness and tingling in my right side, my right leg and foot. And I'm an active person playing tennis and stuff, and I'm like, I don't know, whatever. Went to the PT and wasn't getting better, and this just sort of progressed. It just stayed bad for 3 years, 2020 to 2023, with basically no reprieve. So I went to see everybody's guy. That's what I learned is everybody has a guy. Oh, go see my guy or whatever, or my person who will heal you. And I did that for 3 years and wasted a ton of money.
Were any of those like spiritual healers kind of thing?
No. I got as far as I consider chiropractic and acupuncture close.
Yeah.
But they didn't help, and I was just super frustrated and in pain, and basically the feeling like when your leg falls asleep and it doesn't, and you're just waking it up. That is perpetual for me.
That sucks.
Plus pain, plus now like cramping. So there's a kind of like combination of muscle, some motor issues, and some sensation issues. So something's going on, and I went to Kaiser, went to all their specialists, did every test. Went to a neurologist at Kaiser, and this was the kind of the fuck up, is she said, I don't see any, did some tests with me and said, I don't see any reason for it to be a central nervous system problem. Anyway, one night, September 2nd in 2023, I woke up in the middle of the night and just seized. All I remember was seizing like hardcore. My entire right side went stiff, and my wife...
So seize, not seizure.
Yes, it was a seizure.
It is a seizure.
It was grand mal seizure. It's the only one I've had, which means you can lose consciousness, and it's both hemispheres of your brain. And my wife, all I remember my wife saying was, "Oh my God, Amir," and then then it's blur for several days, ambulances and CT scans in my family and moving hospitals, and essentially they found what's called an oligodendroglioma. How's that? Which is basically a kind of tumor that is made up of fat cells that are already in your brain. It's not caused by your phone. It's probably something that was in my DNA from birth, actually, and gonna happen. And none of my misbehavior, smoking and drinking and all the shit.
You couldn't blame yourself.
I couldn't.
That's the slither of Catholic.
I smoked when I was 11, man. I smoked cigarettes when but no, it's not related to any.
You were a fucking cool 11-year-old.
It's very rare.
For that generation, that was gangster.
Yeah, I learned to smoke then. Took a break until I was 15 and smoked again.
Yeah, that's when I started.
Yeah. But it's just a really rare, unusual thing. It's the cells, the normal fat cells, and it causes this thing. But it's sitting in a spot that is pressing on the signals that send all the same signals toward that side of your body. So that's basically what happened. I spent the last year doing chemo, and the beginning of it doing 28 days of radiation. And so they don't cure brain tumors, they stall them. Mm-hmm. And so I have the best of the worst. I have the best case scenario based on the type of tumor I have, which is that the treatment should stall it out for many, many years. And that's where I'm at. And so it's been a very strange, like, time has been so strange. Like, it's not fast, it's not slow, it's just weird. Like 2024 has been like just so fucking weird.
I mean, I can't imagine, because it's already been fucking weird.
Yeah.
What was it Cat Williams said? All big dick deviants are going to be exposed.
Yeah. I mean,
you haven't even been aware of that.
No.
Oh man, it's anyway. Sorry to sidetrack us. It's just funny that like this is the year where all of my childhood heroes are like coming out, and like it was one thing when it was Harvey Weinstein and a bunch of people I didn't care about, but like not that Diddy was my hero, but but it's like you really like it makes me reevaluate Biggie Smalls. So anyway, it's been a fucking crazy year.
I mean, it's an interesting side note about that with people who do things, that are whatever, morally, ethically depraved, whatever you want to call it. It's like, I remember my big realization of this was when Louis C.K. got busted. So it's like, my point of view was that he's one of the best comedians I've ever experienced in my lifetime. And then he's also this person who did these horrible things. I have never, same with art, I've never had too much trouble separating the two things. Like, you know, like if I heard stories a lot, like Bastian Otter was like, you know, bad to his wife or something. It's like, I don't know, maybe, and that's not good, but like that doesn't. What I was struggling with is that people were going back in time and then saying like, well, now Louis C.K. is not funny or wasn't funny. Well, that doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, so that's what I don't buy into. Is like you can't rewrite. Like you can. It just seems easy to me to hold both of those beliefs as true.
Yeah, I think that Michael Jackson is my number one on that thing. It was like, yeah, I mean, the shit that they say he did is pretty terrible, but damn, that music is good. And like
those first two albums are like,
and then also as more stuff becomes like evident in the industry, I'm like, it doesn't seem like he's the only one. You know? Anyway, I didn't mean to digress into this,
it's true.
but it is funny. I do remember one time I listened to this ad for a podcast that just made me angry on such a level because it was the whole premise of the podcast. I don't know what it's called, but it was like a woman she basically made a whole podcast about dealing with her feelings over Anna Mendieta and what's the dude's name?
Carl Andre?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to take your word for it.
Yeah.
But and I was like, this is such a like intellectual, like it just feels like junk food that's not really sweet, or you know, like junk food that's really just not like that, like life altering or anything. Like it's almost like, who cares?
Yeah. It's I mean I see how these things can be really triggering for people. I just don't understand the conflation of any one act or two acts or three acts that a person, you know, it could be even the word. It just doesn't. They just aren't related. Like I can't go back and not think like humor. Comedy is a great topic because humor is unless you are consciously premeditatively telling yourself not to find something funny, it's uncontrollable.
It's involuntary.
Sorry, that's the right word. That's the word. And so I've watched people do this. I've watched people I know who like are sort of prepping themselves not to find something funny because it doesn't fit their politics. You know, I mean, whatever. Go ahead. I love comedy. I love really dark comedy, offensive comedy. It can offend people that seem. I hate. I'm very anti-identity, so I don't even want to say like even if it's targeted at someone like me. I can find it funny. And there are times when I don't, obviously. Everybody.
Well, it's the intent.
It's the intent. It's like the Dave Chappelle thing. Like he realized people were laughing at him, I guess. Or thought so. You can't know, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I grew up certainly experiencing a lot of bigotry, and I hate, and that makes me really, really sensitive, and I had a chip on my shoulder for a long time about that kind of thing.
Well, I mean, you also come from a culture that I think, if we're comparing Latinos versus Arabs, I would not want to be an Arab. but just based on the fucking Islamophobia. I mean, look at what's happening right now. The whole Middle East is getting fucked, and everybody's cheering for it. You know?
It's super weird. And funny enough, growing up in Beaumont, the demographics were basically, you know, European background, light-skinned people, Americans for several generations, and Hispanic, Latino. And then my family was in there, and I got picked on worse for sure, bullied and picked on by the bullies that I experienced were Hispanic and Latino.
Yeah.
We're fucking... No, it was definitely both. I'll just say that it was absolutely, I was picked on, but both. But the scariest, the scariest couple, so,
physically?
Oh yeah. Just like old school bull.
I never
like
got
meet
that.
me after school. I'm gonna kick your ass kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like where I have to call my older brother to like chase him off type thing, which
That
happened.
sucks.
Yeah. So yeah, but and like real fist fight. But then real fist fights actually with like these like totally like gnarly kids down the street. So I don't know. It's like. It's not specific to any. I don't think it's specific to any culture. I just think that it's just a matter of time and place where you grow up.
Well, there's also the pecking order, right? Like, I mean, I recently fired a therapist because they were just so racist, and she's Indian.
Yeah, totally.
And I was like, and I had to tell her, I was like, your stereotypes are doctors, engineers, academics, and ours are fucking ours are not like ours are fucking drug dealers, creeps, rapists, all of that shit. And she just like that was the barrier there.
Right.
And I was like,
she couldn't see it.
She definitely couldn't see it. I mean, basically she got mad at me because I offhandedly said that I understood people voting for a certain candidate that was part of an administration that was doing horrible things to people.
Right.
And I said that made me understand how people just pragmatically, I even said the banality of evil, where I was like, I'm not thinking these people are actually evil, but it made me understand how Nazi Germany and things like that are able to happen because people make these decisions. And these are things that I say publicly. I'm saying it right now on my own podcast. And she got really upset and she wanted to fucking confront me about it, but she didn't confront me by telling me what she was upset. She told me, you said something that really impacted me, and I would like to you to examine that. And I was like, well, okay. It was like the most passive aggressive thing. But anyway,
that's weird.
No, it was really fucked up. Like it put me through a tailspin. But all of that shit is really real. Like, and I think that there is that pecking order, right? Like, I think that culturally, if you're getting beat up by somebody, but you know that the people that are beating up on you also hate these people, you're like, well, at least I'm not them. I had a hard time when I first moved out here, because I'm from Miami. There is an Arab community there, but not like here. Right. I think compared to Tehran, this is like the second biggest place for Persians. Yeah. And there's like the city, LA, and there's a lot of Arabs. And I started to experience that from Latinos, where I was like, I'm Latino, and they're like, no. And like, my name is Javier. And I went, and I used to always go by Javi. And I came out here and people started to call me Javi. And that's like an Arab name, apparently. Oh. I did not realize that. But then it started to really bother me. And then I realized, like, why does it bother me so much? Right. Oh, okay. Yeah. And that's kind of how I just came up with my general idea, which is very, like, I think anti-racism is kind of a bullshit. Like, I think anti-racism is just Catholic white guilt applied in a secular way to people that feel bad about being white, and it's this performative, like, thing of, like, just self-flagellation. Whereas, like, the real process of recognizing your racism is what I went through, I think, where I'm like, why does it bother me that people like, what the fuck is wrong with me? Right. And I just remember all the fucking 9/11, all of that shit. And it really was like an enlightening thing.
Interesting.
So yeah, I'm with you on that identity. Like, the way that identity is handled now is really, really crazy. Like, it is. And what you were saying about, I think that there is especially specifically with, like, do you know who Chris Hedges is? He left the New York Times because he was writing truthful articles about the war in Iraq. So he made a really interesting point where he was saying that the two parties in this country, one is one is oligarchical, which is the Republican Party, right? And very ruthless. And then one is very tied to corporate power.
Right.
And I think that what we're seeing a little bit with that kind of thing is the corporatization of culture, right? Where like everybody's afraid that they won't be able to have a job. With everybody being sort of like a mini celebrity, you can get canceled for having opinions that are not proper and stuff like that. And one of the things that I do with this show is that I'm like clear on where I stand, where I can, so that I don't get captured by my audience.
Right.
And that people are like, hey man, I don't agree with him on everything, but at least I know where he stands, you know?
Yeah.
And like, and I won't say something years from now and people will be like, fuck this guy.
Yeah. Well, I feel that way teaching for sure. I've completely changed in the last few years, changed the way that like you can't really flow when you're teaching if you feel like everything might be taken the wrong way. And it's a real thing. Like I don't teach organically anymore. I teach like this, like what
there's a pause.
And I say a word. I'll give you an example, the real banal example, but it was a real thing where I actually was teaching 3D modeling, which has a long, hard learning curve. And I get so excited about this stuff sometimes. And I tell the students, okay, we're going to nerd out. And right after I said nerd out, I actually thought, fuck, one of these students is going to just like, because you can file anonymous complaints on he said nerd, whatever, or and
not even in a pejorative, but it's still a trigger.
No, and I've done worse. You make a mistake when a student with a student's gender pronouns. It's very easy to do. It happens to everybody. Trust me, I've seen everybody's evaluations, not just my own. And it's a learning curve, but it also is a kind of like it's not the best environment for teaching to feel like you're being scrutinized for the wrong things, and there's also like scrutinized for what you're actually trying to impart.
There's also a certain cachet that comes, and like it's like we grew up in a very snitches get stitches kind of culture, where like now it's like you're celebrated for calling things out, right? And I actually honestly think that that's what I think she thought she was doing. She was like, she was my therapist. She was confronting me,
right? And
I literally was like, okay, if this is how you guys do feminism now, I would never. But but it was like it was so crazy, and like after we did that session, and then I did another one, right? And then after like that whole week, I was just upset the whole time. Yeah. And I had literally told my therapist, like, this is how crazy it is. I literally told her that I thought I was a bad person because no matter what I did, I was still part of the system where taxes go to murdering people. Yeah. And I said, I am a bad person. Didn't hear that. The whole concept of my therapy with this person has been about my Catholic guilt, and just completely not. It was like I offended her, and she needed to make me. And it wasn't like she didn't even tell me until the last session when I fired her that what it was that bothered her. She just wanted to sort of randomly make me dwell on my misogyny. And then when, it was like fucking crazy, dude. It was, and like now I just don't want to be in therapy at all.
Yeah. It's an interesting other topic. Yeah, for sure. Because it's supposed to be, but that's rampant in, I'm sort of guessing she's relatively
she's
young.
in her early 20s.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's rampant in the way that therapy is being taught. I don't envy you in that. It's doesn't sound so helpful.
No, and then I just went and talked to my mom about it, who is literally the person that I was telling them. I was like telling her, like, yo, my mom and my sister voted for this. And I it just makes me feel really weird. And I still tell them straight up, and they're like, oh yeah, okay.
Right.
So it was like, I was like trying to process my feelings, and she was like, no. And then,
Interesting.
yeah, it was crazy. It was a very, very, I mean, I'm still talking about it.
Yeah, it's so weird.
But I don't want, I feel like we got sidetracked because I brought up this stuff. I wanted to give you some more chance to like it. How has this whole experience been? Are you still on medical leave or are you teaching now?
I'm teaching. I went back after 2 quarters of being on medical leave. So it's basically, there's multiple factors, but basically one factor is that I will be epileptic for the rest of my life, but I take medication, and part of the difficulty has been fine-tuning the medication. I take medication for seizures, and they had to kind of fine-tune that, and that took like 10 months, and I have complaints about the healthcare system, but I don't want to go there either. But I also...
There's a hero out there.
Also, but see, that's a perfect example of like, it's not black and white. It's like I've had Kaiser my whole life. They saved my life. They cut open my head and biopsied it and stitched it back up, and I'm alive and figured out what it was, and I had very good healthcare for a year, and I'm grateful for it. They also pushed generic medications on me that didn't work very well, and it took me a long time to figure out that there are name brand medications that cost a lot more for them but the same for me, that now I'm learning are working much better.
Yeah.
That's fucked up, because that's 10 months of my life that was really, really difficult.
Yeah.
And didn't need to be, and I know, and I confronted the doctor on it, and they have a way of just sort of...
Because they're in network. That's right.
Yeah, they can diffuse it, and I'm changing medical insurance and stuff. But
well, that's funny that you say that too, because when this whole thing happened with Luigi, the guy that the United Health guy happened, I didn't really realize this, but Kaiser is one of the better ones at not denying stuff, which is crazy because, percentage wise, from what I've seen of charts, they're one of the better ones, but I didn't think about the element of the doctors are in network, so they maybe aren't necessarily going to push back against the...
Well, they're just not incentivized to push a medication that is $1,300 versus $10.
And why is a medication even that expensive to begin with?
Because it's brand name.
But why? Philosophically.
No, it's just, So that's one element that's getting under control. And then... finishing treatment, which was huge. I had chemo for a year is a really long time. It's 6 cycles and whatever. So that's done. So I'm kind of have a 2025's looking up,
Less chemo or
no,
none?
No, I'm done with everything treatment related. All I do is just watch and get scans every 6 months or something. And if the seizures are under control, then I'm fine. I'm just,
and you said you've only had one seizure?
No, I've had
okay. I misunderstood.
Probably 100 or something. No, I've had a bunch, but only one grand mal, the one that made me unconscious. The kind of seizures I have are called focal motor, and they affect one side of my body, and it's basically jerking, and they suck. So basically the condition I felt for 3 years, I still have. So I'm in constant neuropathy, which is pain, numbness and tingling in my leg, and pain and cramping. And that has not been addressed. That's hopefully, now that chemo's done, I can hopefully at least see if I can find somebody to help me with that, because that's basically the thing that just it's the suffering that you have to get really philosophical about, because it does not, you can't escape it. I am like straight edge now, it's like my life has turned, into like forced straight edge. Like I can't do anything to party.
Yeah.
To take the edge off.
So now you're just
crazy,
fucking always in raw dogging life. I go
to sleep at 8:30 at night after, and I'm up at 5 a.m, and the only thing that I have control over is like exercising and eating. So I have this kind of like rigid lifestyle in that sense, but the things people do that, you know, that I did too, to take the edge off of the difficulties of a stressful life, I have to find other ways. And, have a really long, complicated, messy, I guess, not messy, but just unorthodox relationship with, you know, Zen Buddhism. And my best friend growing up since fifth grade, he's like my brother, is a Zen priest. And so like practice, I have a long mind body practice that's been going on for luckily 25, 30 years, which has also helped.
Do you know who? I think it's Damien Eccles. Do you know who that is? So do you know? Are you familiar with the West Memphis Three?
No.
So there was like this murder that happened in Memphis, like in the 90s, and they basically railroaded these. It's part of the Satanic Panic. They railroaded these kids and put them on death row that were clearly not the murderers.
Okay, sounds familiar.
Yeah, and then Peter Jackson, Pearl Jam, all these people. I think Peter Jackson made a documentary about it. It was the first time that Metallica put like licensed their music for a movie. They did it afterwards for like Mission Impossible 2, but up until that point they did, you know, and it was this huge rallying through people that like were, I think, anyway, they were, I just couldn't remember the name of the people that I was trying to think, but this guy basically spent his whole life on death row, and what he says that he got into Hermeticism, which sounds like similar to that, like a spiritual magical practice. I mean, not that necessarily it's the same thing as Zen Buddhism or whatever, but I find that really interesting as like a coping tool. Anyway, I saw that he recently did an interview, which is why he's fresh on my mind. But it was really fascinating. You know, like I remember as a kid, I grew up in Miami, so we were party scene kids, and I just remember looking at somebody and being like, I don't know how they fucking do it. Like how they don't do drugs, you know, how they don't drink, how they don't like, it was just such a foreign concept to me. And it's really interesting because now that I'm also trying to like do that less, just to be more productive, be a little sharper. But man, the realities come in, and I'm starting to get a little bit into that. Can you talk a little bit more about how the practice helps and stuff? And it's different than an art practice, but where was the art practice throughout all of this? Like, were you able to keep making?
Yeah, actually, I got kind of right back into it as soon as I could, partially as a just sort of survival technique. I started, you know, I couldn't walk. I had a walker when I came home from the hospital, but I mean in September, but as soon as I was walking and thinking about art again and had some time and I was on medical leave, I was trying to I was like throwing dirt in the air and photographing it in the sky, and you know, sort of took a break from that. And I was in between. What was really fortunate, incredibly fortunate, I should say, is that right before my seizure, like literally, I finished a body of work, a really substantial body of work. And I had 3 shows I had 2 shows lined up, and then a third came up. So I had this kind of crazy, really wonderful art year. I had a show at Diane Rosenstein in LA.
Nice.
I had which was my second show with her. I had a show in Dallas with a gallery that I've been with for a very, very long time, James Harris Gallery, who was in Seattle until recently. And then I had a show in Antwerp with De Boer Gallery, and De Boer's got a space here in LA, and you know, of the same body of work. And so it was like it was done. So all I had to do was get my brain around like getting it to the framer and logistics, and then my family, the 4 of us traveled to Antwerp and to Europe over the summer to go to that show. That was my first solo show in Europe. So it was like weird, you know, like circumstances that that kind of pushed me through that year and kept me busy with finishing that show. And it was called Nothing to Say, the body of work, and which is interesting. But then I'm really involved in a new body of work that's like very far along, but it's super different. It's really quiet. They're black and white, and I'm just to make it short, I'm photographing public libraries. I find, and I started calling the body of work Libraries Are Dead, which was a kind of riff on Nietzsche's God is Dead, or punk is dead, or painting is dead, or photography is dead, any of these prophetic statements that have been made. But I got this like incredible amount of pushback about it, because all these people got really butthurt about libraries and their fondness for them. And my take was that I was never literal. Like, I love libraries too. Like, that's why I'm photographing them, but they're different. Like, they are public spaces. Young people do not go very often to walk through the aisles to check out a book. They're oftentimes unhoused people are using them for charging their phones, sleeping, things like that. So these really interesting architectural spaces, and we have some incredible ones in Southern California, especially in Orange County. Oddly enough, my library in Huntington Beach is a late Richard Neutra building. It's amazing. It's really remarkable, and nobody knows about it except for people who venture out of LA. And I'm interested in photographing inside and outside libraries as they're kind of empty, quiet, lots of reflections of glass from the outside and the inside. Just thinking about them as these spaces that are just changing and impermanent, and technology will change them. And so it's not a judgment, So anyway, it's more of an observation, which is what all my work is ultimately. And I always digitally massage my work, so I'm doing a lot of things like I always get rid of signage. I never have any words in my photographs, so libraries have lots of signs everywhere, and so I remove all of that, anything that indicates that it's even a library. So it's a new body of work. It's developing. It's a lot of fun to do, but it's also, I feel very what should I say? I don't really care what happens with it.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah.
I'm just doing it, and so that's where that's where the kind of practice is comes into play. Is that like
the Zen practice?
Yeah. I have to face, like, I'm really sober and open. People are like kind of tripping on like how like open I've been online about like my health situation. And I have always hated, I guess it comes from the fact that I've always hated like obituaries, and they're always like so vague about like how the person died. And I'm just like, what are you hiding, man? And it's like, death is part of life. So face it, and like I have to face it.
Yeah. No, and I find that
so
I just on a personal level, I find like being open about this shit kind of makes me feel like connected to people.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
And then the hope is that maybe someone hears something and they can identify with it, right?
Yeah,
because we're all gonna fucking die.
This culture is so twisted about it. There's who Alan Watts is?
Yeah,
there's a
70s, right?
Yeah. It's a great Alan Watts talk where he talks about how sterilized life and death are in the West, and that coming into life, it's violent, it's the baby's screaming, the mother's in pain, it's bloody, and then when it comes to death, and everyone accepts it, you come out and you're like, then they clean the baby up real quick, right, to minimize it, and make it look violent and unmessy. But death, we do all these things to either just not talk about it, sterilize it, keep the person in the hospital, keep them doped up. You know, I watched how my father passed away in 2012 and was very close to him and very close to that process. And yeah, I mean, he was so angry at the time about, that was before California had the right to die, I guess, like when you can
assisted like co-working.
Yeah, there was no euthanasia. Actually, he was pissed about it, and I got it. I was like, "You're done." Yeah, and you know, he said in the West, what's so weird is this kind of sterilization and kind of shoving under the rug that part of life, and I've always really thought that was strange, and I guess I'm and I'm also, like I said, I don't have anything to hide about it. It's not it's not that unusual, but it is remarkable how many people I respect that people want to be very private about things. My view is that our privacy is that's just one way of looking at things.
Yeah.
You know, privacy is, you know, my privacy is not really there anyway, because of, you know, my phone is listening to everything I'm talking about, and I'm going to have ads for whatever we talked about on there after this. So, as far as
we're kind of heading back to feudalism with that.
Yeah.
Shit, you know? Like privacy was one of the biggest elements.
I know but it was,
yeah.
but it wasn't always a value.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
No. I think it's like Enlightenment and afterwards.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. And we're kind of going back into like the pre-Enlightenment feudalist, you know,
and the young generation, I think, is chill with it.
Yeah.
Some of them. Yeah.
It's kind of like that thing that, all the comic books that we grew up reading. I don't know if you ever got into X-Men. Okay, well, the pre Marvel movies, a lot of the thing was like, you know, I think Magneto's thing was that people want to be dominated. You know, they want to have an ethic, right? Like I think, and I think it's a swinging thing, right? Like I think that we're probably heading into a period kind of like the 80s now, where, especially like politically, right? There's been this huge effort to resist this kind of movement, this political movement, MAGA, whatever it is, you know, and however you feel about it, I'm fine with you feeling that way about it. But just like if you take a step back and you watch what has kind of happened culturally over the, you know, even over the past year, it is a really interesting thing. I think that the cultural shift is going to be pretty dramatic over the next few years. You know, I think there's a lot of disillusionment, especially in people that were in younger generations that were taught about anti-colonialism and all these things, which kind of mirrors the Vietnam era and the hippie movement, right? Except these guys became more restrictive and more like there was like a level of, I know that like there's a push to like to be like rebellious, you know, but I feel like that snitching element of it is very, very, very bizarre to our generation, right? I'm the last year of Gen X, and like, and I'm just watching it, and I'm like, my God, you guys are all little cops.
And it's incredibly conservative. It's the hardest thing for me to get my brain around, is that you've got this generation of 18-year-olds who are essentially, in my mind, just the other side of the coin of like what I would consider like a sort of Bible thumping, you know, shaming, just the most conservative mindset, but instead
oppressive.
of being having a button-up shirt and going to church, they have nose rings and and dyed hair and alternative ways of dressing and identifying, and I'm making really broad statements, but I'm following. I'm experiencing this, firsthand, and it's a really it's in so many ways the opposite of the tagline when we were teenagers was this like question authority thing. And this is like, it's like wanting to be, like I said, when I was starting to do photography, it was like just wanting to be weird with my friends. We were being we were trying to be transgressive. We were actually, there's, it wasn't like the idea of kind of morally policing other people just seemed, because we didn't want to be morally policed, so it seems so foreign. But I can't, but it's a real thing. Like I'm like to see these students, and I talk to them and have conversations, and they make statements that are basically like, well, this professor so-and-so is, problematic, and, I'm not going to take their class, or this, and so, like I said at the beginning, like this idea of concept creep, where a word like problematic, which literally just means like maybe you have a problem with it, or or maybe it brings, like when I was a student, we learned about, Sherry Levine, and learned about, great feminist artists, and it was like they're exposing problematics in the canon of, and I'm like, it's something that should be examined. But now to say something is problematic is often equivalent with, you should not do this. That's a really weird shift. Like, well, I like the shaming part, or the implied crime, or moral crime, or I just can't get on board with that.
No, I mean, that's literally why I think anti-racism as a concept is so akin to Catholicism. I recognize it. I grew up with that, and it's secular, but and it shows you how little God had to do
with any of that
in the Catholic Church. It is a systematic oppression. And one thing that I've always found, and I'm going to be very careful about how I say this, because I don't want to upset people. I'm like anybody else. I want people to like me, but I also want to be heard and understood. And I'm going to go back to the situation with this therapist. Like, this therapist, I feel like she felt like she was fighting the patriarchy by coming at me.
Right.
I'm her customer. I'm her client.
Right.
She didn't go and fight, or even like, let's just say Trump. Let's just say that Joe Biden is in no way tied to a patriarchy. Let's just say that he's a feminist, and a vote for or even a Kamala, that she's a feminist and she does not have men pulling strings and funding her, right? Like that are more powerful. And let's just say that she wasn't even protesting Trump. She was coming after me.
Right.
She and it's really interesting. Like, before we started recording, I talked to you about this video that I saw that was shared by Jerry Saltz. It was this like prank video that like it hit me, and I was like, Jesus Christ, this is insane.
Right.
And it was women pranking their boyfriends who were taking naps, and it all looked staged. I don't think it was like legit, but the whole premise was that they were putting like little like a carrot or hot dog in someone's fly as they were taking a nap, their partner, and then they would go and cut the thing and like kind of just simulate, and the person would wake up and like be like, whoa,
viscerally
reacting in fear. And I'm like, that's your boyfriend. That's the man that's like on your side, presumably. And so to me, that just feels like it's not coming from an organic place, right? Like, and then it does feel like a lot of the fight against patriarchy is not against patriarchy, it's against like dudes, like, because who are the women gonna call? They're gonna call the cops. You telling me that's not a patriarchy? I got assaulted recently by a Latino. I didn't call the cops because I was worried about me and him, you know?
Yeah.
And like, but like ladies don't think that way, you know?
Like that whole situation is so, it's so messy. Because I've been talking about this with other people too, that the people who are often the loudest are the safest.
Yeah.
You know, so you know, there's something that was, you know, this is early Malcolm X interview when he was pretty militant and pissed, and I still love it when I can find it, where he basically says something like the people that he's worried the most about are like he says white liberals. I don't speak in that kind of language, so I don't talk like that. But basically,
I'm a little bit more comfortable doing that.
Yeah, I know. Everybody is. I'm really fringe when it comes to identity stuff. I'm super. I
try to stay away from it.
I write about it and I talk about it, and I'm trying to like raise my children to not look at the world in those terms. Yeah. I think the word is meaningless. White is as stupid as it could
Caucasian.
get.
We're from the Caucasus Mountains. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, let's look at our DNA, which I have done, and it's pretty fucking complicated. And, you know, it's like, but you know, that's the person that he doesn't trusted the least.
Mm-hmm. No, I
one with those intentions and wants to, you know, make sure and I grew up experiencing a lot of that kind of bigotry, that sort of up until even early in my art career, people asking me, you know, that those things they now call microaggressions. You know, where are you from? And I'd say Southern California. No, where are you really from? And some of those had no ill intentions, and some of those had like, I'm gonna be on, you know, here, and you're gonna be here when I ask you this question. And I'm really sensitive to that stuff, but I've learned to really handle it. I just ask it back. Say, where are you from? Where are you from?
No, where are you really from?
I do. I actually say, and it's completely disarming.
I've had. I remember I was dating this girl in Orlando, and she was like, her family was very rich. In the I don't know what to call it, like the amusement park, like that kind of tourist kind of vibe place, right? But like her family was like all white, and I remember one of her grandparents kind of like it was what I related to when I watched Get Out, and she was like, and it happened with that family all the time, and. You know, when I was a kid, I was like, oh, I like dating white girls because fuck their dads, you know? But and I've definitely dated women who's in Miami whose dads did not like Cubans as a policy.
Right.
But she was like, oh, you know, Javier, I know somebody who's who's a Cuban who's very successful. Meanwhile, we run a whole fucking city.
Right,
you know?
right.
She's like giving me hope for my future.
Right.
You know, and and it's coming from this very like she's telling me she likes me, you know? It's just like, oh, you'll be fine. It won't be a burden to you.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude, that shit is crazy. And one of the things that has been really annoying for me to be out here is just people's understanding of Latinos, you know? Like I get policed on being like, but you're white,
right?
And I'm like,
I can't cope, man. I have written and thought about this topic so much. It's that kind of mentality. It's so fucking regressive and dumb. I just can't.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it. The world is really big, and I find it that the people who have traveled, especially if they were young, seem to get it easier. It's like you know, someone from any country can travel to another country and have a baby with that person, and 3 generations later, if you repeat that process, the colors white, brown, and black are it's like the sloppiest way to think about the world. It's so regressive, and so I'm on this, like, I just try it's very hard in this culture because that's the way we speak, but I try really hard to individualize people, and because my family, I had like 30 people in my family come to my opening at Diane's gallery, and we took a big group photo, and it was like maybe 20 something. But we have like an incredibly diverse family. Like it's remarkable. Mm-hmm. If you go back to like my niece and nephew and their children, up to we run every continent in except for Antarctica, and we got bases covered everywhere, and I love it, and it's so beautiful, and it can't be reduced. It can't, you can't even try to reduce it to that terminology. So when people do, I just resist it. I just don't. And it's also, don't play that game.
It's also like specifically with the example of me being, policed into being white, right? Yeah. It's a thing where there's an erasure that happens there to like a lot of conflict because a lot of that shit is ethnic.
Yeah.
Right? Like when you look at what happened in Germany in the 40s, they weren't brown people.
Right.
They were people of a different culture.
Right.
Exactly. But still had the light skin.
Exactly.
Right. And so to me, like there's this like, Americans are so invested in domestic policy, and it's amazing to me, and that's reflected in this last election. All the people, I was like, oh, this is the year that foreign policy is actually going to matter.
Right.
And and I'm not like for any third party candidate. The only reason that I voted third party was because I wanted there to be a record so we could track it, like a census, of like, these are the people that are disaffected. And it really worked in Dearborn, Michigan.
Yes.
You saw 18% people voting third party.
Yeah,
I don't think
that's amazing.
I don't think that they're like, yeah, Jill Stein is the best candidate.
No,
they're just like, we're not voting for playing. This. Yep. We're not playing with this shit anymore. You don't get us.
Yeah.
And to me, like that was kind of what I was trying to process with my therapist. And I went to my therapist and I was like, dude, this is freaking me out. And she was like, we need to talk about your misogyny.
That's really... Yeah, it's really odd. That's a super odd story, but no, it's totally true. I mean, and then the whole Latino thing, that one is also a category that I just it's laughable when you spend 3 minutes thinking about it, but it's used so often, and Latinx is even
Latinx is a problem,
or Latinx.
That shit's gone. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that.
No, I see it on like
on campuses.
No, like businesses, but yeah, it came so inorganically. Most language changes from culture, from large culture trickle down. This was from the academy out, but basically, like. I just use any kind of example, but just like, tell me what a like rich, business person in Guatemala has to do with like a poor farmer in Argentina. Give me their identity.
They probably wouldn't identify as Latino. Latino is a specific American identity, which is why I'm so protective of it. It is an identity of people with diaspora, and one of the reasons that I have such a problem, and a lot of us have a problem with the word Latinx, so Latino only exists within the U.S. It's people of not Hispanic, because some people don't like that term. Right. I would identify as Hispanic because I'm pretty, my background is pretty European.
Yeah.
But imagine you are an immigrant family.
Yeah.
And you come over here and the men are having a hard time getting jobs. Do you think that in the patriarchy of America, the women are getting access to opportunities on the same level? So a lot of this idea of machismo and all of this shit is imposed in some sense, especially in the American context, right? Like Mexico has a fucking woman for president.
Yeah. I saw that. Yeah.
Like fuck off.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the problem that's why I brought up the race thing with the therapist. I was like, yo, like you're calling me something that is racist, like to assume that I'm a misogynist, based on what I said, and to focus on that is fucking problematic, So like when my mom came over, they weren't handing out Latina women jobs,
right?
And they weren't handing out white women jobs in the same level, but they had a better position,
right?
And so that family unit is very important for the word. So and it's like an ignorance to the language, because there's Latinos, which is the broad term, but there's also gente latina, which is the same thing. It's the people, and it's just grammar. And to erase our grammar, and like that shit was just crazy. Anyway, we are way over your heart out. Anything that I didn't ask you that you would want to say on the way out, that you might drive home and be like, oh, I wish I had said that. We've been at it.
Follow me on Instagram. No, I don't know.
No, I mean that's a separate question that comes.
No, I think that's cool. Yeah, I don't think so. I probably will. It's
I'll have you back on. I definitely will. I really enjoy talking to people when we get into these spaces, especially like I feel like we have
art adjacent,
but we also have a cultural, and I think culture is so important. In terms of like art doesn't exist in its own bubble.
Right.
Right. So, which is why my sign off is topics that may or may not be art related. Yeah. So what your Instagram?
At Amir _Zaki
_ZAKI.
Yep.
And then anything coming up?
Anything coming up? Well, I'm in part of that Pacific Standard Time group show that's in Riverside at the Culver Art Center, digital, the kind of digital revolution, in one of the titles that's part of that whole thing. I feel like there is something else coming up, but now I'm blanking on it. But mostly just working on this new body of work, and hopefully finding a place for it, trying to make a book. I've got a couple of books out, and so that's kind of what's going on.
Awesome, man. Yeah. And if you guys enjoyed our conversation, we are really trying to make this a thing. If you guys want to help us out, there are many ways you can do it. You can like and subscribe on YouTube. You can rate us 5 stars and give us a nice review on wherever you listen to your podcasts. And we've recently, during COVID, I stopped promoting the Patreon because I just felt bad. Nobody really had money, and it felt weird asking for it, but I kind of need it. So if you guys have the means and want to help support the show, I've started to release early episodes, and I'm working on fleshing that out. $5 a month, you can get early a week early, see what's coming up before anybody else, and that really does help us. I've had 2 patrons for the whole fucking time of this that I really appreciate, and I feel bad that I stopped promoting it because they've been helping fund. I bought a computer off of that. Nice. If you guys would like to do that. And then I'm working on merch stuff, but that's not quite ready yet. I don't like the services. Yeah, the swag. So we're trying to monetize and make this a little bit more sustainable over the long haul. But thank you guys for checking us out, and we'll be back next week with another guest and another topic that may or may not be art related. Thank you, man. This was really, really good conversation.
You're welcome. Thank you. It was fun.
Yeah.